Augusta Crocker began life with bright prospects. Her father, Captain John Crocker, had made a respectable fortune in the China trade and built the first mansion ever on Shore Street. Her mother, Susan Wicks, was the only child and heir of Dr. Francis Wicks, the self-made esquire, whose opinion always carried weight with the citizens of Falmouth. Augusta's charmed life changed, however, when a mysterious disaster befell her family. The first omen appears in the land records of August 1827. Both Wicks and Crocker suddenly sold their stately homes within days of each other. Dr. Wicks moved into a small dwelling in the business-oriented upper section of Shore Street. Exactly where the Crockers and their brood of 13 children landed is unclear. The father and son-in-law had apparently mingled their investments and lost badly. Soon the Crockers would find themselves on the town's charge, while Wicks could only watch, unable to help. Residents like Augusta and their families, who are unable to provide for themselves, came under the responsibility of 3 overseers of the poor, elected by the town. The next inkling of trouble for the Crockers came in 1829, when those overseers voted, quote, to converse with John Crocker, to request him to put out, i.e. indenture, his daughter, Augusta, and if he will not, to inform him that they shall put her out, unquote. The overseers expected the able-bodied poor to work, and they reserved the right either to assign that work within the confines of the poorhouse or to bind out those under their care through articles of indenture. Indentures were contracts whereby prosperous citizens would promise to feed, shelter, clothe, and educate a minor in return for his or her service. In this way, young people could not only contribute toward their support, but they could also be taught useful skills and thus increase their chances of escaping lifelong poverty. Indentured servants rarely behaved so badly that their masters wanted to cancel the contract. Dr. Francis Wicks's granddaughter Augusta is one of the few exceptions. The Crocker case is unusual in that the overseers did not typically request people to bind out their children. Some parents did so voluntarily, making private arrangements on their own terms. Others, realizing they needed help, allowed the overseers to act in loco parentis. The involvement of the overseers in Augusta's future suggests that her father had asked for some form of town assistance. Likely, still reeling from his failure and clinging to a semblance of gentility, John Crocker did not want his 13-year-old daughter bound out, but he had no choice. In January 1830, the overseers, assuming a custodial role, voted, quote, to bind out Augusta Crocker to Captain Nathaniel Eldred of West Falmouth, unquote. Within the year, her parents and younger siblings resorted to a 2-month stay in the poorhouse. Here they may have worked in the attached farm, growing their own food, or more probably they picked oakum, a tedious chore, unraveling old ropes into a mass of fuzzy fiber to be sold to ship owners who then used it to plug leaks on their ships. Meanwhile, Augusta was not submitting meekly to her fate. She had not been brought up to be a servant, and perhaps her father's opposition to the indenture emboldened her. She raised enough havoc in the Eldred household so that on June 7, 1831, her master requested the overseers, quote, to take charge of Augusta Crocker again, her conduct having been such, she has broken her indenture, and he thinks he cannot keep her longer, unquote. In Falmouth records, instances of a master trying to return a rebellious servant are rare. Mindful of who her father and grandfather were, and might be again, Eldred may have been reluctant to use disciplinary measures on Augusta that would have brought other servants into line. John, Susan, and their 4 youngest spent another 9-month stint in the poorhouse in 1832-1833. Showing flashes of the commanding spirit that had once quelled a mutiny in the Pacific, John clashed with the overseers, who insisted that he was breaking their rules by seeking outside employment. Sensibly, John believed that finding a job outside the poorhouse was the only way he was going to get his family off town assistance. The determined 60-year-old finally succeeded, and the Crockers left the poorhouse for good in 1833. In 1840, John Crocker was once again the head of his own household in Falmouth. As for Augusta, she seems to have gone her own way. For a while, she lived in Tisbury, then Augusta's childhood home on Shore Street, now part of Shoreway Acres. As for Augusta, she seems to have gone her own way. For a while, she lived in Tisbury, then returned to the Falmouth poorhouse alone for 2 months in 1839. Thanks to dogged detective work by a research volunteer, we know that Augusta moved to New Bedford and eventually married a farmer, Isaac Jennings. She had at least 2 sons, Roland and Alfred, named after 2 of her brothers. Augusta's sister Susan, unmarried, was living with the Jennings household in the 1860 census. Black sheep or not, Augusta maintained at least some family ties. She died in Dartmouth, age 86, in 1901. Descendants of hers were living in New Bedford in 1920, and some may be there still.